Hello once again, dear viewers. You're watching Eri-TV. Welcome to this week's Open Mic. My guest for this evening is Mr. Fulvio Grimaldi. He is an independent journalist and an Italian documentary film producer. Welcome to our program, Mr. Fulvio.
Thank you very much.
Actually, you've been in and around Asmara and Eritrea throughout the past week, and you have much to tell us about Eritrea. But before that, I just want our viewers to have a glimpse of who Mr. Fulvio is first. Please.
Well, as you said, I'm an Italian journalist. I try to be independent. I used to work with Italian state television, RAI. I left it some years ago, and since then I am independent, and I make documentaries, mostly as a war correspondent, or on areas of tension, or on areas where I feel that information is not correct and truthful. I try to put in a little bit of an alternative information. And this took me also in my early years to Eritrea, a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, which brings me to that question, because this is what I have as my first question. Since when do you know Eritrea exactly, and what sort of documentary have you made about Eritrea?
We came to Eritrea, myself and a colleague, in the year 1971, in May. We have heard about there was a war going on, a liberation war, Eritrea against the Ethiopian colonization. But it was very little known, and we felt that this was an interesting episode of the anti-colonial struggle of the global south, especially Africa. And very little was known, and so we felt we should go there and explore this war, understand what it was all about and how it went on. So we arrived in Sudan. We got to the headquarters of the Liberation Front, and we were allowed to enter Eritrea with a group of fighters. We started from Kassala, went into Tessenei, and then made our way with this very valid and very friendly and efficient group of fighters all the way through Barka, Gash, and on to Barentu, Agordat, and near Keren. And this was a very long stretch, all made on foot, with one camel, which was carrying the luggage. And it was a fantastic experience, because we came across for the first time the Eritrean people, the normal people of Eritrea, and the fighting people, the militants, who were informing us of what the whole struggle was all about, the liberation of a country from a very ferocious and oppressive domination by Ethiopia. Since this country had been under Italian colonization before, we felt a particular responsibility to support this people's struggle for freedom. We had been responsible for denying this freedom in the past, since the late 19th century. And so we, as Italian citizens of today, we felt we should give a hand to make the world know what was happening here and what this struggle was about.
Mm-hmm. It must have been very dangerous, though, for you at that particular moment. You're telling me you were here in 1971, and going to the trenches when there is still the enemy at bay. I mean, I need more of your experience.
Yes, Raphael, this was it was in effect, it could have been dangerous, but we were very well protected by our friend fighters. They knew how to move through the country. They knew where the Ethiopians were, where their strongholds were, where their land was occupied, and they managed to move us about and keep us safe. So we moved all the lengths from the border to Keren and beyond, being always on the safe side. We came across a few areas that had been bombed before we passed through, but it didn't affect us. I would rather say that we had a more dangerous experience a few years later, because I went again to Eritrea to the struggle for liberation in 1977. And from Yemen, we crossed with a few Eritrean refugees and fighters. We crossed from Yemen to Dankalia, to Danakil, and we landed there in a village called Barasole. That was 1977. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we had landed there, as if the Ethiopians had known about our arrival as journalists, as correspondents, they bombed the village and they completely destroyed it. And there we really got away, together with part of the population, by a by very little. We took refuge in the caves above the village, and we saw the village destroyed, burned, and cattle killed, and many human beings being killed. And this was giving us an impression of the ferociousness of the Ethiopian occupation that didn't spare civilians in order to hit the targets that they intended to hit. I know that since then Barasoda was reconstructed and is now alive and kicking. Mm-hmm. Then we crossed the whole of Dankalia, which is another beautiful country. So this was another experience of Eritrea, an important experience.
Mr. Fulvio, you know Eritrea since the liberation struggle. I'm just curious, what was your impression about the liberation movement when compared to other liberation movements?
Well, I'm aware of the fact that, because I lived through this period, that there were, as practically in all liberation movements, there were contradictions within the liberation movement. There were different objectives, different ideological backgrounds, and so on, that made for, you know, as everybody knows, the historians know, that made for a difficult period in time at a certain moment of time. But on the other hand, it's been a struggle of really a people's struggle, where the whole people was involved. And it lasted 30 years. I think it was the longest anti-colonial struggle of the whole anti-colonial period. Nobody had such a resistance. The fact that you today talk about resilience as one of your main principles, I think was born out of the fact that you proved that for 30 years a whole nation could be resilient and carry on to the final victory, which is something very impressive. And you achieved it, and we are all happy about that.
Especially the fact that all powers at that time, they refused to give Eritrea its rightful place in this world, probably may have helped you or motivated you to come and report on the cases of Eritrea.
Yes, this is really, I think, a black stain on the history of Western and general civilization, because Eritrea was left alone. It was left alone by its former colonial master, the Italians, who should have shouldered the responsibility for helping Eritrea to get free. It was abandoned and antagonized by the Western powers, who supported first the ruler of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, in his repression and his destruction of Eritrea. Then we had also the other power, the other world power, Soviet Union, who supported the follower of Haile Selassie, the Colonel Mengistu, in the same purpose of not allowing Eritrea to be free and in persecuting the Eritrean people. So it was really an unbelievably hard task for the Eritreans. You had everybody against you. And those that were not against you, the most powerful were against you, the others were indifferent. So you did it all by yourself, with very little help, with perhaps some sympathy in public opinion. Because when I returned from my 2 or 3 Eritrean trips, I had taken lots of photographs, I have taken lots of recordings, and I made public exhibitions. I wrote in my magazines and newspapers of all kinds of ideological opinion, and they were accepted and followed by public opinion. Public opinion was very favorable, very sympathetic to the Eritrean struggle, but only public opinion, the people, not the world powers and not the governments. And so you made it by yourself, and again, congratulations for that.
How did it make you feel when the country, the people rather, because when the people that you were actually supporting managed to achieve independence all on their own in 1991? How did it make you feel? I want to know.
Well, this was a great day and period of joy, really. Having been so close to these fighters, having been marching with them, having been sharing with them hunger and thirst and difficulties, physical difficulties, and having been supported by them, and having come across during our marches the villages and the villagers and the normal people, the peasants, the farmers, the women and so on, the children, and having been supported by them. When we didn't have any food anymore, they would provide us with food. They would come up with a gazelle or with a capretto and so on, and would help us throughout the whole experience and so on. So that these people, so generous, so warm, and so friendly towards foreigners, even Italian foreigners who had been here before as masters, repressive masters and so on, this gave us the idea of what quality this population, this nation has, and therefore that this nation should achieve freedom by its own means against all odds was really a sign of hope for humanity. This is how it should be interpreted. The victory in '91 of the Eritrean people is a victory for humanity, and it shows that one can have the greatest odds against one, and if there is a will, there is a way, and if there is a generosity, if there is a resilience, if there is a human quality, one prevails. One prevails not only for oneself, but for humanity at large. You really had a victory for humanity. So, as I'm a member of humanity, it was a victory for me too.
Mr. Fulvio, what would you say are the secrets behind this success that we have managed to achieve?
It is expressed, I think, if I may advance a theory, it is expressed in what seems to be the main principle, the rule, the moral rule, the psychological rule that still accompanies you and dictates your behavior. Resilience, being based upon one's own capacities, not depending on anybody else, which is something that others don't tolerate, because others would like you to depend on them, in order to make you do what they want. But you have been through from the beginning. You have said, it's our job, it's our task, it's our objective, we are doing it by ourselves. We can. And you prove that you can. And you are now proving that you can, that again you suffer a certain degree of isolation, unjust isolation, just because you have this kind of characteristic that you want to do it your way and by yourself. And that's, for those that want to maneuver nations and countries and so on, is not welcome. So, again, you are an example for humanity here.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Fulvio, I know you've been here, like we started in this interview. I've mentioned to our viewers that you've been here for, what, a week and a half, 2 weeks almost?
10 days.
10 days, yeah. It's actually quite short period to basically ask you how you found the country to be. But if I may say so, Mr. Fulvio, how did you find Eritrea?
Well, we were very, very happy. We had the confirmation of what was our previous experience, of a kind people, of an hospitable people, of a friendly people, of a smiling people, a people that smiles easily. And when it smiles, it opens up. It's as if a light goes on. Our experience was that you are developing fast, that you're making a great effort in against, again, lots of difficulties. You suffer under unjust sanctions. You're keeping under aggression, whether direct or indirect, from your powerful neighbor who threatens you all the time. Still part of your country is occupied unjustly against the United Nations rule and so on. But you carry on. And I've seen parts of your productive development. I've seen enormous progress in your agricultural field, which is leading to what you want, self-sufficiency in food. I've seen integrated farms. I've seen young people working with enthusiasm in the fields and giving their free hours to tilling the fields and so on. I've seen your great development in mining and in other industrial activities. So a beautiful country that everybody knows it's a beautiful country. Even so, you've only seen it in books, in geographic books. You know how beautiful it is, the cities and the landscape. On top of this, I think you are a driving society. I met also problems, I cannot deny it, that you have been free only for 25 years. And this is, from where you started, is a long haul to get to be all right and satisfactory in all fields. You have things to do, you have problems to overcome, mainly due to external responsibilities, but you are, I think, what I've seen, you're doing well and you're proceeding, and you'll make it.
Okay, Mr. Fulvio, now you're here because you're here as a team now with your wife, who is also a producer.
Yes.
You are producing a documentary about Eritrea. Okay, which areas have you visited so far?
First of all, I want to mention that we have been having the great privilege of somebody who has accompanied us thanks to the help of the authorities here. We've had a great friend who has a great knowledge of this country, Elias Amare, who knows everything, has a deep knowledge, and has therefore understood our needs and taken us where it was necessary and useful to take us. We have been to Asmara, the most beautiful city, I think, in Africa. We have been to Massawa. We have studied the situation along the coast, their biological approach to your sea and to your coast land, the production there, the industrial production that has been established in Massawa. We followed the road that you are improving again, that the Italians built, but you are improving and keeping very efficient. We went on to the west and we crossed through another fantastically beautiful town, Keren. We saw your hospitals everywhere and the efficiency and the care you take for your patients, and really that is another achievement, the health system that you grant your whole population together with your education system. We visited schools, we met students, they talked to us freely and happily, and seemed to be very valid new generations coming up. Then we went to the far west, to the Barentu and the Barka Gash area, and that reminded me of my early days in when we walked through the semi-desert, the desert. We were looking for wells where we could find some water. We looked for trees where we could find some shade. We looked for villages where we could get some food, and so on. It moved me. That I must say that this area, that might be considered the less lush area, it's a difficult area. It only has acacia, it has very little to offer. Yet people stay there and get their living out of there and improve also through irrigation there. But it is an area, despite the harshness of its environment, that is very, very dear to me. Because I lived with the fighters in those days, a great experience. And I felt that I was getting younger when I saw this. It's an illusion, unfortunately, but it was a very strong feeling for me.
All right, Mr. Fulvio.
And then we went to the south, sorry. We also went to the south, Mendefara and beyond, and we went to the border area. And that's another deep impression, because we went high up on the mountain where we could see the area where the latest battles took place, the one that eventually marked the victory of Eritrea, the one in 2000, where the Ethiopians tried to break through and move up to Asmara and were defeated in a 3-day gigantic battle. We saw that incredible scenery, that valley and the mountains behind, and that too was very moving.
Mr. Fulvio, now, the documentary that you are making about Eritrea, why are you making this documentary now?
You know, what really frustrates an honest journalist, any honest journalist, and who pursues truth and wants to tell public opinion what goes on and what really happens. The fact that the general reporting on Eritrea is either limited and insufficient, inadequate, or it's absolutely and utterly biased. And unfortunately, this affects the majority of Western mainstream media. And one understands this because information in the West has by now been getting so concentrated into few hands that share the same interests of those that make sanctions on people, that lead wars on peoples, on nations, and so on. Therefore, they project images of countries that do not obey the general rule, that are demonized, that should convince public opinion, well, that's a country that deserves our sanctions, deserves our aggression. And of course, they tell lies. most of the journalists that speak or write about Eritrea have never been here. They just echo what they know is suitable for the great powers and for the great mainstream media. This is frustrating, it is intolerable, and it affects not only Eritrea, it affects many other nations and peoples that do not toe the line. So my testimony in our work with Sandra's participation and our other friends that will work on this documentary is to try and break through this wall of bad information, of wrong information, of demonization of your people, of your leadership, of your structures and so on, and tell what we saw, what we experienced, the people we met, how they behave, what they say, what they think, and so on, what really goes on, which will be a total denial of the general image. And I think there are in Italy and in Europe at large, there are sections of opinion that are aware that they are being lied at by mainstream media, and that they are ready to accept an alternative information of which they don't know what it is. We are trying to give them this alternative, truthful, correct information and give Eritrea its real status. That's what we hope we shall achieve.
Okay, Mr. Fulvio, we are actually running out of time, and we wish you all the best with that. But before we conclude, we are celebrating the 25th independence anniversary celebration of our country now, which you were part of during the liberation struggle even. So any final words or message that you would like to tell the people that you knew and you still know?
Well, the message to my Eritrean friends, to the whole Eritrean nation, is thankfulness for what I earlier said was their contribution to human liberation, to justice, to international right. I thank them for this, what they have done and what they keep carrying on. And I wish that their 25th anniversary would be a prelude to the 50th anniversary, to the 100th anniversary for an Eritrea that grows stronger and especially freer from conditioning and from aggression and from demonization. In Italy, I shall try and tell them what I said earlier, what this is all about, what here happened, and what 25 years of liberation have produced in this country.
We thank you for your time,
Thank you,
Mr. Fulvio, and we wish you all the best in your trip now, the remaining days of your trip. Dear viewers, that wraps up this week's Open Mic. It's good night from us.
todo